Hello, clever people, and welcome to my rundown of the top 15 worst films of 2017. While 2017 was probably the best year for film in a really long time, I could easily say that it was also probably the worst year for film in a really long time. Because just looking at how awful a lot of movies have been this year, I'm actually kind of in shock with how many stinkers have come up. I guess it's just a balancing act. When you have a year when there's 15 amazing movies that come out, you also have 15 pretty awful movies that come out. So I'm going to list down 15. I was going to do 10, but there are just so many bad movies this year that I decided to extend it to 15. But I will also have some honorable mentions, so it'll be about 20, but there will be about 5 honorable mentions, then I will start listing the bottom 15. Honorable mentions include Daddy's Home 2, Despicable Me 3, Annabelle Creation, The Circle, and The Shack. So starting off at number 15, we have The Promise, which is a movie that probably should have been a lot better because it had a lot of talent involved, and it also had a very good director who has done good work in the past, but honestly, this movie was just such a drag and such a complete and total bore that I nearly fell asleep in the theater. There have been a lot of bad movies this year, but I'm not sure if there is a movie, other than probably a couple others, that have bored me to the point that The Promise did. But just with this movie, I nearly fell asleep. There's no other excuse for it. It's just completely uninteresting. They set up no conflict of interest. Instead of being about the war, it's like 10% about that, and it's 90% about a love triangle that feels completely underdeveloped and completely melodramatic. Next up we have Rings, which is not the worst horror movie of the year, but similar to the last one, it might just be the most boring. Because the other two, at least I had something to hate throughout. The thing about Rings is, you don't really have something to feel too passionate about hating until really the last part of the movie. Up until that point, it is just continuously uninteresting and uninvolving. It just features no conflict of interest. It's literally just like a girl and a guy go up to a place and look around for about an hour, and then in the first 15 minutes she's trying to find this guy, and then in the last 10 minutes they have one of the dumbest and worst twists I have ever seen. I saw this movie on my birthday weekend, and I hated myself right after so much that I decided to go make myself happy again by seeing La La Land right after. Great decision, because I needed to cleanse my eyes after seeing garbage like this. At 13, we have XXX Return of Xander Cage. This movie was honestly so unreal at times, I was kind of shocked. While watching the movie, I really didn't feel like I was watching it, just because so much happens in here that just doesn't really feel like it was supposed to be shot. Vin Diesel sleeps with like 9 women, even though he's like 55. The dialogue is gone through so quickly and so thrown away that it just feels so awkward. I was completely stunned by how bad this movie was, because I was expecting a bad movie, but I wasn't expecting anything on the level like this. I thought it might be fun and sort of just a throwaway movie, but it was much worse than that. At 12, we have The Dark Tower. It did not anger me as much as some other movies on the list, but it definitely got close. I don't know what made me so angry after I saw this movie, but something about it just completely pissed me off. I really don't know what it was. Maybe it was the so much potential that was completely wasted, because you have such a great story with this. You have fantastic actors with Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey. This was, I believe, in my most anticipated for last year, which is such a shame and such an awful thing with how it's so bad, because this easily could have been great. If you would have gotten a better director and more clear vision, you would have had something so much better. But throughout the movie, I was continuously shocked with how uninteresting, how it continued to get so much more uninteresting, how boring the action scenes were, and just how dark and forgettable the movie was as a whole. At 11, I have Transformers: The Last Knight. Retrospectively, this probably should be lower, but there are 10 movies this year that I can say are worse. The thing about this movie is, it isn't necessarily boring, because you can get some entertainment by just sort of watching how much of a train wreck it is. It's just the editing in this is really the big killer. It does not need to be 2.5 hours long. There are so many flaws in simple edits and just simple scenes that really don't need to be there, and the movie as a whole just feels so disconnected discombobulated and just completely unlinear just by the fact that its editing is so off. But at this point, you kind of expect awful movies with this, so it's not like it surprised me. I went in expecting 2.5 hours of pain, and that's basically what I got. At 10, we have Birth of the Dragon, which I can confidently say was the most boring movie this year. Good lord, I don't think I reviewed this one. Yes, I didn't, because it came out on a weekend on the 25th, and I don't remember why I didn't upload reviews. I think I saw it like a week late or something, but this was a movie I regret seeing. Every single movie on this list, I don't regret seeing because I learned something from them, or at least I got something out of them, even if it was barely anything. Birth of the Dragon I got absolutely nothing out of. They tried to stretch a 20-minute idea into a feature-length movie, and it failed absolutely miserably. It feels like, I don't know, it feels like a slime that you just stretch way too far out, and because of that, it's completely devoid of anything throughout. It's basically just something so thin and something so stale that it really feels like it doesn't need to exist. At number 9, we have King Arthur, The Legend of the Sword. This movie should have been pretty good, I think, because it had Guy Ritchie behind it, who adds so much great style. He's like a Wes Anderson style director. He just adds some great style that you can only really get from him. But in this movie, it feels like he directed maybe 2 or 3 scenes, because those scenes had style, and then the rest of it was just big CGI, unnecessary, just boring material. There was nothing going on in this movie. I hate using the word boring, and I've already used it so much in this review, but honestly, nothing of consequence really happened in this movie until, like, at the beginning when he pours the sword out of the stone, and then there's some training. I hardly remember this movie, and I remember it more vividly. I remember it less vividly than movies I saw in January, and this came out in May, I believe. I don't even remember when it came out. I'm usually great with movie dates, but if you put a gun to my head right now, I could have no clue when this movie came out. I just saw it, and it was so painstakingly forgettable that afterwards I felt kind of sick, and I desperately never want to see this movie again. 8 is sort of the tipping point where you get some of the truly horrendous movies. And to start it off, we have Bright. This movie, obviously, it had no potential. It really wouldn't have been good. Just because the premise alone is so odd, it feels like they're trying to be too edgy with it, trying to have it be in LA and trying to have all these different creatures and trying to be an allegory for racism. The thing is, this movie could have maybe been smart or something if it was handed to a better director, but the movie is so unbelievably unsubtle that it actually kind of hurts. There's a line in the movie where Will Smith's daughter says to him, "Hey, don't be rude to that guy. He's a human too," and it's an orc rather than a human being. And all he says is "shut up." And humans say shut up to other humans. That does not mean that they think that they are not humans or that they do not possess human rights. He was literally just saying shut up because something angered him. I get it that it's a kid and they probably don't like the word shut up and they think it's a bad word or something, but just little things like that are scattered throughout. I got about 20 minutes into this movie before I started looking at my phone, and then basically an hour in, I just kind of completely gave up on it. There was nothing that this movie could offer in the last hour that I didn't already witness in the first one. This movie just should not exist. At number 7, we have Ballerina, a movie that I believe was supposed to come out in 2016, and then it just got shelved or something, and it came out on a small weekend in August 25th. It was another one that I didn't review because I really didn't feel any motivation to, but I saw it with one of my friends, and throughout, we just looked at each other in pain constantly. This movie feels so unbelievably formulaic that it hurts. It feels like this movie was made by a machine, that somebody went up to a machine, pressed some buttons, and out came Ballerina. The movie may not be as technically horrendous as a lot of other movies above it and below it, but if this movie isn't the most forgettable movie of the entire year, I don't know what is. At number 6, we have Diary of a Wimpy Kid: The Long Haul. This movie was just straight up painful. Maybe if I had seen it without a friend, I would hate it more and it would be in like the 3 or 2 range, but this movie was honestly just so completely dreadful. Whatever fun existed in the previous 3 Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies is completely eradicated. This movie is made purely for kids, and it's a kids movie, sure, but kids movies should be able to entertain adults somehow or give them something to look at. This movie was just constantly filled with revolting and repulsing gags that just got less and less funny and more painful as the movie continued. At 5, we have the Emoji Movie. It honestly wasn't as bad as I was expecting, or I don't think it was as bad as anyone else was expecting, but the matter of the fact is, everyone was expecting this to be the worst thing in existence ever, the worst thing ever since probably the Holocaust. And it wasn't the worst thing since the Holocaust. This movie was definitely horrendous and technically just awful, but you can say the fact that it was competent, that the animation was competent. However, you cannot deny how completely and utterly lazy this movie feels. How it really feels like absolutely zero effort was put into any of it. The voice acting, the directing, the writing, the animation, all of it just looks so stale. And it's just such a statement on how Hollywood will take anything that's big and turn it into a movie. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it doesn't lend itself to a movie at all. They will turn it into the movie, and if any movie, it really proves that Hollywood is just going out and stretching too far with films recently. The Emoji Movie is what proves it. At 4, we have Geostorm, which easily could have been a much better movie if they would have gone the route of being a satire, if they would have had the big CGI, the huge budget, if rather than making a melodramatic and stale movie that feels like it's regurgitated, that it's like every movie similar, every disaster movie before it, then I think that maybe you could have gotten a nice satire out of the movie if it was poking fun of itself, but it wasn't, and you got one of the most dreadful experiences I've had in the theater all year. The acting is probably the worst acting of the year. It's just so unmotivated, and just the way that they talk to each other sounds so unlike humans that it just feels so off. The movie was like 2 hours, but it legitimately felt like 6. It just kept on going on and on and on. I thought that I was an hour into the movie and I was only 14 minutes in, and it continued to be like that as it went throughout. This is a movie that you send to your enemies. You tell your enemies to go see it. You don't get them fruitcake for Christmas, you get them this. I stole that quote from Schmoes Know, but it is a quote that definitely applies to this movie. Well, coincidentally enough, my last 3 movies of the year all have horror elements to them, or they are straight up horror movies. And at number 3, we have The Bye Bye Man. I reviewed this movie very early on. I believe it was one of my rant reviews because I was amazed at how incompetent this movie was. Some of the editing decisions are absolutely hilariously awful, like a certain decision where a girl is about to run in front of a train and it cuts to the train conductor screaming no at her, and then it cuts back. It's a completely unnecessary cut, but besides that, this movie sort of proves everything that's wrong with horror movies these days. They're full of jump scares, they have no psychological elements, and I think maybe this movie was a lot worse than intended because you could have made something good out of the idea that if you think about it or say it, that it comes closer to you and eventually it'll kill you, but they did nothing with that idea, and they basically just made such a generic horror movie that was completely laughable. There's even a scene in the movie where a guy starts singing Bye Bye Man really loudly, and he's like driving somewhere. I hardly remember the movie, and it's so unbelievably hilarious that I laughed so loudly in the theater. Everyone looked at me, but I didn't care. I didn't care about what I did at that point because I could have seen the first 15 minutes of this movie and I would have gotten everything that I could have out of it. It was just abysmal. What can be worse than Bye Bye Man? It's what's at number 2, which is Wish Upon. amazed with how awful this movie was. The fact that it isn't my number one of the year is kind of shocking to me, because when I saw it, I was just so amazed by everything that happened in the movie. There's just so many different scenes that hurt my brain thinking about them. Just they're so completely illogical. They make no sense. There's some dialogue that feels so, oh my god, I'm having flashbacks to seeing it. There's some of the dialogue is so horribly written that it's kind of offensive. There's a certain dialogue part where she's talking about, the lead character is talking about smegma, and the way that she delivers the line and says it to the bully character is absolutely hilarious. And the 4 or 5 twists in this movie, and then the extra twist during the end credit scene, all of those, as they went along, the movie just got progressively worse and worse and more funny. So this should be my number one of the year, but I saw a movie that I was so repulsed by that I felt like throwing up afterwards, that I came home and I did like a 20-minute rant review, I think. I don't know, but the number one worst film of the entire year is Boo 2: A Madea Halloween. This movie just completely defies the idea of what a movie is. This is just a bunch of scenes. They hardly have to do with each other. The plot is so basic and rudimentary that it feels revolting itself. And then you get into the comedy, which is unbelievably cringeworthy, that feels so painfully unfunny that it's the type of humor that only Tyler Perry and his friends would laugh at. If you want my full analysis into this movie, I'll leave a link in the description below, but just be warned, if you watch it, you'll probably see me in a very depressed state, because I was depressed after I saw this movie. I was really angry, and I just wish that movies like this didn't come out. It would be really great if they didn't. No other reviewers that I watch or that I know saw this movie, and I wondered why, because it was a big release, and it was like I think it was number 1 or number 2 at the box office during its weekend. But after seeing it, I understand why, and if his other movies are like this, I don't know how this guy continues to make movies, and I don't know how he continues to make money. I don't understand why a single person would like this movie. So that's it. Those are my bottom 15 of the year. Another honorable mention that I forgot to mention is Flatliners, and retrospectively, I think that might have gotten into the bottom 15. I don't think that I ranked that one, though, beforehand, but just know, don't see that one either. Guys, this has been a crazy year for film. I am not going to do my top 10 best films or my top 15 best films of the year until I am able to see Phantom Thread and The Post. I believe that will be January 12th. So that weekend you will see my top 10 best of the year. But thank you for sticking out with me in all my rant reviews and all my angry rage over all these movies. 2017, you can't get good without bad, and you got some great this year, and you got some just completely horrendous this year. Please only watch these movies if you're intentionally trying to pain yourself, and I don't know why you would. Watching these movies is like committing seppuku. It's not a good idea. Don't do it. It'll hurt you so much. Don't see a single one of these movies that I mentioned. Just wait until I release my top 15 of the year, and then you will see some movies that you should definitely go out and check out and see. Alright, that concludes my bottom 15 films of the year. What are your least favorite movies of the year? Or what do you think of Boo 2: A Madea Halloween if you've seen it? Comment in the comment section below and let me know. I'm Robert Burke, and this has been The Clever Critics. Goodbye.